Welcome to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Episode 6, Sustaining Balance During the Covid-19 Lockdown.
All right. Now, check this out. There is another potential negative that can come from having too much FaceTime with your dog. Okay. Again, slightly coming from my own experience, but also from tons of experience with other clients who have this problem. Based on we are home a lot more, this means we spend a lot more idle time with our dogs as well. So idle time means any time that we are not actively teaching or engaging our dogs in something productive, right? Which I honestly would say is like 90% of most owners with their dogs. So idle time means that they're just sleeping next to you. They're on the couch next to you while you're watching TV. You're eating and they're under the dinner table. That's idle time. You're not really giving the dog any instruction or feedback, but instead they are just kind of hanging out and lounging. So one thing that happens that I've noticed with a lot of my clients, when the levels of intimacy start increasing, meaning that the dog sleeps on the couch with them, the dog is constantly following them around, the dog, sleeps in bed with them a little bit more now that they're home, or let's say you're taking a nap in the middle of the day and your dog's sleeping in bed with you. What we start seeing is the dog on a very chemical level can start getting attached to being very close to you, right? We all know the hormone oxytocin, dopamine. We all know these feel-good hormones. What happens is if we are constantly next to our dogs and touching them, stroking them, rubbing their bellies, petting them, giving them affection, again, which there's nothing wrong with at face value. But what happens is when it happens excessively, our dogs have a tendency of falling in love with the physical affection. In essence, they fall in love with us. Right. So what this has the potential to do, not only does it have the potential to increase separation anxiety, but it also has the potential for certain personalities of dogs to actually start becoming codependent on you and sometimes protective of you or possessive of you. Right. And so even though we're just enjoying our newfound vacation with our dog, we do run the risk of potentially creating an imbalance in our boundaries with the dog.
Yeah, imbalance is the perfect word. It's a matter of balance. I know that we might have talked about this in the past, but this is one of those things where when you talk about training a dog that tends to have these sorts of issues, or at least tends to have this sort of personality that could easily lead to these sorts of issues, the minute you start talking about structure and balance and limitations and rules, people start assuming, oh, does that mean I can't, do this and that? Can my dog not be on the couch, on the bed? And that's not the case, as long as you keep things in balance.
Right. No, exactly. There always has to be a little bit of a give and a take. Pretty much what we're trying to avoid is the dog to have an unhealthy expectation of their owner, right? For example, in any relationship, if I expect for my girlfriend to constantly every day make me dinner all the time, and she never signed up or agreed to that, well, eventually there will be a point where, let's say I'm rude when she doesn't make me food. Right now, mind you, I do all the cooking in the relationship. This is completely a hypothetical, but the whole idea here is, unhealthy or unhealthy expectations or imbalanced expectations can be developed very easily because our dogs are creatures of habit. If we habitually give them a lot of affection and attention, eventually they will get used to it and learn to expect it. And then when we take that attention away from them, they will be upset, right? And some dogs show that upset emotion, in an outward form where they're aggressive, destructive, possessive, reactive. Some other dogs, they show that as depression, right? They will show that as depression. So every dog deals with anxiety a little bit different, but we just want to go ahead and remind you guys of those. What are some ways, some practical ways, Mariano, do you think that people could just prevent separation anxiety, prevent codependency, prevent possession and overprotection?
So some practical ways that people can go about this is, you made a great point earlier. When you spend the time with your dog that you should be spending, maybe take them for a walk or play with them in the yard or whatever it is that you're comfortable with doing, in terms of however much exposure you're looking to have in this time. Once you're done, dogs go potty, dogs get their water, they're good to go, put them away. It's okay. It's not mean of you. And it's definitely an important thing to keep in mind that boundaries are important and they're beneficial for all parties involved. So don't feel bad. I know a lot of people are like, but I'm home. Why crate my dog?
Mm-hmm.
But it's for your dog's learning. It's to make sure that they develop the way that they should and to avoid mistakes that they would otherwise make because they're dogs and it's our job to look out for them. Another practical way would be one thing that I've had clients do in the past is when they're working their dog, we talk about, duration work, place commands, downstays, things like that while they're around. And the dog can even be, roughly in your vicinity. I mean, if you've got a little placemat in the living room, I don't mind if you're on the couch and your dog's like 5 feet away, as long as they stay put, because even though they're spending time near you, it's not so much indirect because they're currently working on a command. It may not look like much because they're laying still, but every time you get up, every time you move, and your dog has that tendency to kind of like jump up and wonder where you're going or what you're doing.
Right.
It takes practice for them to remind themselves, oh, you know what? I'm supposed to stay right here. And it keeps the relationship in a certain context of, oh, dad or mom love me very much, but I still have to listen. And expectations still are what they are.
Right, exactly. All right. So I would agree with all of that. The key, guys, again, is balance. And it's a pretty vague term, but balance pretty much means to me, we just want to prevent our dogs from having an unhealthy expectation of the owner. That is what we're trying to say. Remember, guys, dogs are our family. We love them. But at the end of the day, our dogs need to adjust to our lifestyle as long as it's a healthy and structured one. Versus, us having to constantly cater to the dog's insecurities or issues that they may be running across, right? At a given time. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and talk about the next subject. So as we promised, we wanted to talk about mental and physical exercise, things that you guys can do at the house, that would really help burn some of this energy. Again, this is for some of those working dogs out there, Belgian Malinois, German Shorthair Pointers, and here's the funny thing. It's not a specific type of breed. It's a specific personality.
Right.
Let me go ahead and just take the time real quick to define what we consider to be a working dog, and please chime in anytime you want.
Sure.
So a working dog, in the scale of dog training, there is one side that is an assessment of intelligence. And we define intelligence as the dog's ability to use their senses to adapt and survive in the world around them. Right. So these are dogs who have great survival and adaptation instincts. Right. This is the dog that you tried to crate train him. You left, you came back, you see him sleeping on the couch, and you still see that the crate door is locked.
Right.
and you're like, how the hell did that happen? Or that dog that, is a ninja. And as soon as you turn your back, he snatched that steak off the counter. And you turn your back and all you see is a bone, right? It's this dog who is an amazing assessor of behavior, and they're constantly learning from the environment and learning how to adapt and survive in it. Okay. On the other hand, we have what is called trainability. So trainability is how motivated our dogs are to learn tasks for specific items, right? So if I have a dog who really loves a tennis ball, right? Well, that means I can use that tennis ball in training. If I have a dog who really likes food, which is a majority of dogs, then I can use food in training. If I have a dog who really likes to work for affection, well, I can use that motivator as a form of praise or reinforcement in training. So pretty much the more things my dog likes to work, like if my dog has multiple levels of currency, this is what we call a trainable dog. This is super trainable, right? Now, a working dog is a pretty darn good balance of the two. A dog who is very intelligent and can think on his own and survive and adapt. And on the other hand, we have a dog who is also very motivated. So on average, you will see a traditional working dog who is really good to be left on its own, and very smart to figure this stuff out. But at the same time, they love tennis ball, tug of war. They love treats. They love humans. They love this and this and that, right? So the idea is you have a very driven, intelligent dog. And that's what we consider to be a working dog. So if this type of dog is yours, well, I hate to say it, guys, having a smart kid means they're harder to raise. Right. So what we're going to work with, and as my mentor used to say, everybody wants a smart kid and a smart dog until they get one. Right. Right. Until they're teenagers. So what we're going to put focus on is mental and physical exercise, and how you can use them together. All right. So mental stimulation, again, is from our previous episodes, is controlling the dog's focus. What is the dog able to focus on at any given time? And physical exercise is obviously how much energy the dog can expel. So let's talk about a couple of exercises that are pretty simple, right? If your dog already has a foundation of obedience, right? And we'll talk if your dog doesn't have a foundation of obedience. But if your dog does already have a foundation of obedience, one really great mental exercise is going to be the development of distraction work and stays. Okay. So what I would recommend, if your dog does know how to stay, I would start bringing out treats, for example, and I would throw those treats about, 6 to 8 feet away from the dog and insist that my dog stays. Now, if your dog gets up, block your dog from going to get that treat and make him start over until he starts understanding the condition. Okay. Now, what happens is through this process of trial and error, your dog is now forced to think, how in the heck do I get this darn treat? Right. And through this process, your dog starts burning what we call brain calories, right? Or brain energy. And it's very similar to when you work on an essay or if you work on a hard project at work, 2 or 3 hours of hard focus and problem solving and trying to think rationally really burns you out, where by the time you get to your lunch break, you're like, oh man, I need to leave work because it's too much. Right. So this is part of our goal. Now, teaching our dogs to have self-control, and not only does it develop a better angle in our relationship or a better side to our relationship, but it forces our dogs to now think rationally versus impulsively. And so this type of game, we call these hold and releases, where we tell our dogs to stay. We throw something of value in front of the dog. We make sure that dog holds, and then we release it at a random interval. So we're teaching 2 things. We're teaching to stay, or we're teaching to hold. And then the second thing we're teaching is permission to actually go get the thing that we want the dog to have. Right. So this is one form of mental stimulation. Any other forms of mental stimulation you could think of?
Yeah. So we talked about it in a few other episodes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Distraction work is a huge one, but there's also the other 2 Ds, distance and duration. Now, we talked about duration a little earlier in the podcast. So I think distance is a huge one because mental energy, of course, is huge. But physical energy, especially with, like a Malinois, GSP, GSD, and things like that, there. A great way that I like to work both mental and physical energy is to do kind of a combination of distance and distraction work. So it would be something like what I notice a lot of times in these working dogs, and you said it a little while ago, was they do have a kind of hierarchy of what they prioritize in terms of a reward. So they like food, but they love a tug toy type thing. So if that's the case with your dog, or vice versa, whatever the dog likes more, you can use that as the ultimate distraction and the ultimate reward. Yeah. So an example being, I'll take the dog, put him in a downstay, reward him with some food, give him the command to stay, walk far away, however big the yard is, or, a good 20, 30 feet, however long your long leash is if you're not in a yard. Now, I'll take a ball or whatever the case, throw it somewhere, dog's not allowed to move. So it's that same sort of concept. But then once they are, you release, boom, and the dog flies, burning all that mental energy. After the reward, they grab it, you tug with them, same thing, work it back and forth. And so you're working not only the distraction downstay, but also the long distance recall. Let the dog get some running done while they're at it.
Yep. And that is actually an extension of the hold and release. That's actually what they teach hunting dogs in the hunting discipline. So that's actually really awesome. I think adding that dynamic of the highest value, reinforcer, that's super cool, right? So just to reiterate what he said, anything that the dog finds the most highly valuable, be it the tug toy, a squeaker, it could just be your affection or a piece of food. You're going to have that at the end of the situation. Now, thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.